Taking a critical look at the gaming news of the week. This is Augmented Reality, presented by the Triple S League.
Good morning, everybody. Well, happy Saturday to you all, and welcome to the Augmented Reality Podcast, your source for news, leaks, and insights about games in the gaming industry. It's April 27th, 2019, and this is the Saturday morning edition of the show. As I said, well, in some parts of the world, it's Saturday afternoon. Wherever you are, I hope you're having a great day today. My name is Asheninity. I'm here, as always, with Cybsidian. How are you doing this morning, sir?
You know, people think common sense is common, but it's not.
That's true, I guess. That is
also a quote from Don Cherry, seeing as we were just compared to him. So
that's very apt for today. Yeah, I guarantee there's going to be a Cyb rant later in the show, so definitely stay tuned for that. If you're listening live this morning, please say hello in the live chat. Send us your questions and comments there as well. We'll read and respond to as many as we can throughout the podcast, and don't forget to slam that like button. It likes it rough, and it tells us and YouTube that you appreciate this content. If you're listening after the fact on one of the audio-only platforms, we're glad you're here as well. We appreciate your likes and follows. It does take us a couple of days, or as it was the case this week, like a week, to get the podcast up to the audio platforms. Sorry about the delay there. So it all depends how busy I am in a given week, but I try to get them up as quickly as we can. So if you want to get the latest info sooner, we encourage you to hit the link in the description to subscribe to the Triple S League YouTube channel. And in addition to the podcast, you'll find lots of other fun and informative gaming content there as well. Speaking of which, for those of you who have been wanting more Gaming After Dark, we do have more episodes coming. They've been delayed for just basically logistical things. Had to rewrite some of it. So anyway, those are coming your way as soon as we possibly can. Now, there have been people chatting in our live chat since like 9 hours ago. Now, it's cut me off here. I can't see everything. But hello to everybody who's been chatting busily since long before we started. Overlord 580, Neko Collins, Andrea Velasquez, Minty66, Ghost Fixer, Niv Aussie, and a few others. And I'm looking for a specific message here. Oh, there it is. Flavio Vieira says, "Good morning, all. Ready for another dose of Ron McLean and Don Cherry of video games." That is, I could not be more flattered by that comment. If you're not a Canuck like us, you may not know who Don Cherry and Ron McLean are, but they're like really, really famous sports commentators who, like, there's like segments with them in literally every hockey game. Since I was a kid, Don Cherry is a very, he's kind of he's known for being an outrageous character with lots of crazy outfits and things. But anyway, very famous people. Anyway, we love that you guys appreciate this show so much. All right, some interesting news to talk about today, as always. So we've got an analyst predicting that people are abandoning PC gaming, and Cyb has no opinions about that at all. And
absolutely none. I'm going to rant about that for an hour.
I can get... There will be a Cyb rant later, but we're going to get to that later on in the show. We've got some Cyberpunk news. We have a new interview. Now, this is about a week old, but and it was discussed on the community podcast last week, which was on our channel. But we decided to talk about it here because we hadn't talked about it on our podcast. But we wanted to bring up, what does it mean when they say that the Cyberpunk 2077 gameplay is quite different from what it was last year. So when we saw the gameplay demo shortly after E3, if the gameplay looks different now, what does that mean? So we're going to talk about that a bit. We have some info on the quests, what the quests in the game are going to be like.
We have to clarify. We have some. We have a little bit of clarification on some stuff, and we've gotten this just recently here. So, since the articles have been up and out, it's easier to. It's much easier to get devs who are working on a project to talk about a particular thing when it's had a major interview come out. about it. So, yeah, it's basically, it's like, so about this article, want to expand on it a little bit? Well, a little bit, sure, why not? That kind of thing. So we're expanding on it just a little bit. We're going to go into some depth on it, and then so it'll be pretty handy.
Amelia Sizrocha says, "No Gaga, no buy." I love it. There is a question about Lady Gaga in this interview, and the answer is rather funny, and I think some of it has been lost in translation. We'll get to that, but first, this is something we didn't catch until early this morning. But there's a tweet from Tim Sweeney, the CEO of Epic, who is now on record as saying, if Steam committed to a permanent 88% revenue share for all developers and publishers without major strings attached, Epic would hastily organize a retreat from exclusives and consider putting our own games on Steam. So this is a really interesting statement.
It's also a lie.
Well, there's a lot of people
it's
who feel that way. There's a lot of people that are very skeptical of what he's saying. But if you're not caught up on this news, the Epic Games Store has been nailing down a lot of upcoming games and currently released games as exclusives. In other words, Epic has been offering a ton of money to developers in order to exclusively release their games on the Epic Games Store instead of, Epic plus Steam plus whatever else is out there, GOG and various other places. So Epic has been busily trying to build up the content of their store by basically dumping a lot of that Fortnite money into developers and saying, hey, we'll give you, we'll cut you this massive check if you only release on our store for like 6 months or a year. These are limited time exclusives, but it's been met with some annoyance from gamers. But anyway, just like Saib said, there's a lot of people who are really skeptical of this statement. So why would you say basically outright that this is a lie on his part?
It's a total lie. It is a statement and a bluff made in an attempt to put Steam into a bad light. So he's using a tactic of like a fake challenge that if you accepted it, you're going to be permanently wounded, and if you rejected it, you'll be permanently wounded. This is a statement that he's contrived to hurt Steam and nothing else. It's absolute and total altruism, fake and phony. For starters, you cannot run a business off of 12%. You just can't. You can maybe run it off of 15%. So 15% pays for pretty much most of the services, staff, energy, and general running of the company.
Mm-hmm.
And 15% is 15% past that it pays for is basically your profit line. 15%, give or take, is what it costs to run a platform. Period. Epic does not make a simple 12% off of the majority of their games. This is not what's running the Steam store. What's running the Epic store. What's running the Epic store right now is a combination of their two other major things, which is the games that they produce themselves, which one of them is Fortnite. The other thing that runs Epic is the 5% cut that they take from every video game that uses their engine, which is, and I've said this before, their engine is really solid. The devs who work on improving that engine, making it better, making it good, those are all solid people with years and years and years of great experience working in an industry where they open up their technology for other people to use in a very fair and very, very competitive environment. That part of the company, which is not really under the sway of Tim, it does their own thing, and they do it really, really well, and they deserve that 5% cut that they get from all sales with the Steam with games using the Epic engine, whether it's on Steam, whether it's on GOG, whether it's on Xbox, PlayStation, whatever. They make that 5% and they earn it. So that between those two things, Epic's storefront is profitable. But if Epic had to do a storefront by itself, they would have to immediately boost that cost cut, that take close to probably 20%. Originally, they were going to do a 90 10% split, and they backtracked that before they officially unveiled, because their accountants just could not find a way to prevent the store from hemorrhaging money every single day. So that's why they went with 8812. So this is a fake assault against Steam to say, hey, why don't you do this, and show us that you're not a big baddie, and we'll do this too. And then notice how he says this is like, we would hastily organize a retreat from exclusives, quote, and you didn't read the quote, but he puts in quotes, while honoring our partner commitments, meaning that they have no intention of backing down from any of the existing or planned or in games that are currently under negotiation for exclusivity. Which means that all of their current stuff and all of the stuff that they have planned for the next little bit would all be, immediately moved over.
I just assumed that meant that their current contracts would stand, like, for like Metro Exodus and Borderlands, like they wouldn't scrap the exclusive for that, but going forward.
It's the way that it's worded. Look at the way that it's worded.
While honoring our partner commitments. Yeah.
Our partner commitments is any commitment that they've made to any partner and any partner's commitments that have been made thus far, and things that are within the traction. If you were to see this, which you won't, because as I've explained, it's a complete fallacy. They would not release any of the games that they currently have on their lineup. For Epic, they would, of course, they'd say, "Oh, just wait a year, guys. It's gonna be so much better. Just wait a year, 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 wait a year." In the meantime, it's like, buy this now, buy this now, buy this now, buy this now, and it would still be there. And then he says, "And we'd consider putting our own games on Steam." Again, another very interesting piece of BS there. They only have one game that would possibly have any interest in moving onto Steam, and that would be Fortnite. Every other game they have in their current library that's created by them, by Epic, is not worth mentioning. It's just, they're small-time games, period. In fact, if you remember, Paragon, I believe it was called, was just canned because it wasn't profitable. So Epic doesn't have exactly the best record as far as showcasing look at how much money we have. Look at how much from all this amazing library of games. Epic's never been known for their high quality games that they produce. They're known for their high quality engine that they produce. They haven't, Fortnite, until it stumbled into the Battle Royale thing, had in no way, shape, or form was doing well. We played that game on release, and it was pretty much dead. And they were having a lot of problems, and they did the Battle Royale thing, and then they suddenly pulled ahead to legendary proportions. So let's not kid ourselves, Tim. You don't make games that are good and interesting. You lucked out on one of them. And not many people would bother playing, and some of your games are available on Steam, and pretty much all Unreal games are already on Steam with regards to what's out there and being produced, because that's the way that you make the sales. Now, could Steam drop it down to like 20%? Probably, absolutely, and they'd still make a lot of money. In fact, it would be better for Steam to go back and start developing games on the side. In kind of like a sister company stance, because really, they made Artifact and it's kind of garbage, but that's kind of what happens because people have moved on. So it's definitely like it's a platitude. It
does seem like a statement,
fake
like
altruism.
Yeah, it does seem like a statement that it seems like he's banking on Steam not being able to do this. Mm-hmm. Also, I'm not buying that the reason that they're doing exclusives is because of what Steam is doing. That doesn't make sense. It's like he actually replies to his own tweet saying, Such a move would be a referring to Steam switching to like an 88%, 12% revenue split. Such a move would be a glorious moment in the history of PC gaming and would have a sweeping impact on other platforms for generations to come. Then stores could go back to just being nice places to buy stuff rather than the game developer IRS. I'm not buying that he's doing this.
Yeah,
that his primary motivation is
disgusting.
Yeah, it's just about getting the doing what's best for the devs and improving the industry. Like that may be a secondary outcome, but I'm not buying that that's the reason why he's doing this.
Also, you got to understand, it's like, again, we go back to this Tencent thing. Tencent owns well over 40% of the company, and they have controlling. They're controlling about 48% of the board. Tim is barely holding on to power in his company, and Tencent absolutely plans on pushing him out. Like, just again, look at every other company that they've ever bought out. Tencent they're out for power, they're out for control, and they're out for, pushing out anybody who could remotely challenge them on any way, shape, or form. They are full of themselves, and they are intent on their actions. Things have changed a lot in companies that they buy out. Often, they force out, people who could make core changes. They're absolutely disgusting in a lot of ways.
Right. I think this response to the tweet sums it up really nicely. This is from an account called Space Nation. That's a very small account. I have no idea who this is, but the reply is that we're not avoiding the Epic Games Store because we're loyal to Steam. In fact, many of us do have and use other launchers. We're avoiding Epic Games Store because it's just bad. Your practices are anti-consumer, your platform sucks, and your personal attitude is even worse. I think that sums it up really well. I don't think, don't mistake the criticism of Epic as some kind of a loyalty to Steam, as, some people seem to want to characterize it that way. It's like, why are you guys so loyal to Steam? It's not like they're any better. Well, actually, they are better in terms of their product is better. Are they also a greedy corporation that probably takes too big of a cut of the game developers' revenue? Yeah, absolutely, they do.
Mm-hmm. I personally think that the best comment here is what Michael Rand said just below the comment from Space Nation that you read. Where it is simply a GIF, or a GIF, depending on how you pronounce it, of Will Ferrell in that Santa Claus elf movie, where he whispers into the fake Santa, the fake Santa, and says, "You sit on a throne of lies," because it's absolutely true. It's absolutely true. He does. Again, yes. Would we love to see a 20%, 80% split? Would we love to see, developers get more of that money? Would we like to see a lot of these publishers get pushed out? Because a lot of these publishers are, like, in a lot of ways, their jobs are kind of pointless and useless now. In a lot of ways, you can bypass them completely. You can self-publish with general ease, and their interference in development for decades has done nothing but harm the industry overall. It was really needed back when people were desperate for money to begin with, but they've also built this throne of lies that they sit upon and stare down and destroy companies. EA is terrible to work for, and they just, again, with the whole Anthem thing, it's just they destroy companies, they destroy visions, and they destroy dreams, and they do so because it makes them money. It's absolutely it's gross. Yeah,
indeed. All right, so that's about all there is to say about that. So we'll move on to Cyberpunk 2077 news, which is one of our favorite topics to talk about. It's always popular. Cyberpunk 2077 is probably our most anticipated game. It's one of the most anticipated games ever, I think. There's a new interview that, it's not brand new. This was a This happened back on 4/20, April 20th, and it's in Spanish. But so the website called Area Yugones.
You butchered that spelling. Yeah. Mad Queen, when we did cover this back on the Sunday Community podcast that we streamed.
Yeah.
Here.
So how do you say
those
this?
of you who were there? I can't even.
I wonder if this is no, this is an image. So Google Translate changed.
It's like Juan. It's like how they do the wand. I can't. I'm not even gonna, because I'm just gonna butcher it.
All right. Well, anyway,
it's pretty funny. I didn't read the title of it. I gave it to Mad Queen. I said, please read this because I will absolutely murder the English translation of it. So
anyway, they interviewed the Quest director for Cyberpunk 2077, who is a veteran CD Projekt Red employee, and asked a bunch of questions. And so one of the questions was, "Where is Lady Gaga?" And the response they got was, "We have it in our basement." We have it in our basement. I think something's been lost in the Google translation there. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what he was actually trying to say, but that's rather funny. Horrifying, depending on
the basement. That's what they were saying.
That's kind of what I figured, but it reminds me of when I was watching a few years ago with my kids the Lady Gaga Muppets Christmas special. And my first thought was, I can't tell which one's Lady Gaga. All right, so one of the big questions that came out of this, though, was how is the game different from the gameplay shown last year? And this has been a question that has been a matter of discussion for a lot of people recently, and it's led some to speculate that the game, there's no way this game is coming in late 2019 or early 2020 because, they've changed a whole bunch of stuff and they're reworking a whole bunch of things. We talked about this a little bit on Wednesday, but we talked about it specifically from the perspective of the combat and the gunplay. But this is a little more general, so we just wanted to touch on this and talk a little bit about what does it mean that the gameplay is going to be different. But anyway, here's the response that this Spanish website got. And this is translated from Spanish via Google Translate, so there may be some weird language quirks in it, but this is in general what's been said here. Well, as you know, the game is still in development, and obviously we want it to come out the best it can be. We are polishing everything and constantly thinking how to make this game more interesting, how to make the gameplay cool, and, well, the gameplay we saw last year was basically a small fragment of the game. There was not a clear picture of how the game fits into an open world, or how it fits into a larger image of the game, so there are obviously many things that we have not taught about the game yet. I think he means not revealed about the game yet, I think is what he was trying to say. There are things that we are still working on, and I would say the game is quite different from the gameplay revealed last year. But as I said, there are still details in which we are currently working. Now, this quote that the game is quite different from the gameplay that we saw, that's what's been making the rounds, and so that's why we wanted to talk about this. This is what has been in all the headlines about this interview. But what does that actually mean? In context, he's talking about how there's that the gameplay we saw was a small piece of the game, and I mean it certainly. It's interesting that he says here that there was not a clear picture of how the game fits into an open world, or what the larger picture of the game looks like. And of course, we only did see a small slice of what the game is actually going to involve. But I certainly did get the impression that it's going to be a vast world where you can do almost anything in this massive city. So it's interesting that he would say that. But what does it actually mean when he's talking about the gameplay being quite different from what we saw then last year? Are you there, Cyb?
No, I'm here. Sorry.
Sorry. I should have clarified that I was asking you that question. So what does that actually mean?
Well, I mean, overall, it's like they're making generalized improvements across most of the systems, of course, and the combat. But something that I want to focus on, which was mentioned, is that they're improving the quests in that. Now, we've heard that they're increasing the ways that you can complete quests, but it actually goes a little bit deeper than that. They actually have a mandate that each quest should have more than one way to finish it, and that doesn't necessarily mean that's going to affect your gameplay. That's going to affect the story, right? Because if you fail a mission, you would think that progressively as you fail more and more and more, you'll by the time you actually finish the main mission, things will be kind of crappy, and it'll just be generally the story will be pretty bummer. It's like
Right.
I,
So,
I would
mean,
imagine the way that they kind of tie up loose ends in like the final the final you know the final scripted mission, the point at which you come to the story's head. Not that that's forced upon you, that it's kind of an open world thing, but the final mission, just like you have a final mission in Skyrim, right? But you can still keep playing forever. The final mission and how it outcome and how it affects people. You could just make the world worse if you're just a terrible person and you just constantly screw up things. And there's ways to like make it the absolute worst outcome than you possibly get. Whereas I think what they're doing now and how they're handling that is they have that as an option. But there's also more than one ways to succeed, right? You could, it's something that they've been pushing for a while, to try and make it so that you can do the vast majority of the game without getting into fights. And that still is, from having spoken with somebody there recently, that still is kind of it's not the primary goal. It's not something that they're sitting down to say we must make this game able to be completed from start to finish without ever firing a shot. Just due to the way that they add combat into the game and the way that it is kind of set up, and the way that you're going to get jumped by some enemies sometimes for missions that you have completed, even if you have completed them without engaging in combat. There's still somebody out there who might be really pissed off and want to get back at you for having done that, for having done it in that particular way. So not necessarily guaranteeing that they're going to remove all of that, but in the sense that they're going out of their way to say, let's add as many options as you can. So you can complete it by being a ghost, and this is what we're most likely going to see this strongly at E3. The next trailer is probably going to feature a lot of this stealth and a lot of the going in as a ghost, basically. Go in, get the thing, slip out, and nobody knows you're there. Go in, rescue the person, vanish from sight. Go in, secure the thing, and then call in the heavy cavalry as they just sweep the area and destroy everything. But meanwhile, you're walking out and nobody knows that you had a hand in it. That kind of stuff, where we're going to see those options, and then that's going to affect the gameplay as well. So that's more or less what we've been kind of told, and it's nothing super huge. It's what we've known for quite a while. And with this interview, they're basically, that's what we're going for. How much of that, I can't put that into numbers, right? Is 80% of the game going to be 80% of the missions within the game able to be completed without firing a shot, or by completing it in some different way? Are you going to be able to bluff your way out of every scenario, or just 50% of them, et cetera, et cetera? And I don't think that they would want to do that in the way of creating. If you create a series of mission, and every single mission has the same 6 different endings, right? You can complete it in gunfire, you can complete it by bluffing, you can complete it by sneaking, you can complete it by negotiation, etc., etc., etc. If all of those options are always available to you, period, it will just kind of feel like you're showing up to do the same thing over and over and over again. Where it's like, if they force you to make hard choices that are outside of your gameplay, by removing one or two of those options in say their pillar quests, their pillar like main quest kind of things. If they were to do that, then that offers you, or that makes you make a choice. It's like, I can't always be the sneaky type. I can be the sneaky type almost always, but not always. And that's important to offer to offer some choice, not in the sense of me saying, hey, no, they should never allow you to be like a full sneaky character. No, you should be a full sneaky character, but there's also a moment where you should be like, oh crap, am I going to be able to save this person or not? Or do I need to take a shot, right? Or, what would happen if we lost this fight and took it as like a strategic withdrawal or something like that. Like there's a lot of those choices that I believe are really good. Like, I think one of the missions that would be very interesting would be a mission where you're tasked with going after somebody who's really powerful, but somebody's made a mistake, and the person who you're going after is actually way more powerful than you know. They're some big gigantic hotshot, and things go sideways, and you end up losing a companion, or you end up losing the fight in a really rough, tough way. And it turns out that the only way to avoid that would have been to fail like the setup to it, and to be bad at the game to the point where, oh man, nah, let's just call this off. And you don't realize until later how much danger you were in, and then you go, wow, that failure actually saved us. That would be an interesting concept to throw into a game. And people have been looking at this kind of stuff, especially at this studio and some others, where it's like building the story and allowing you to, maybe there's a way that the vast majority of people would fail and not fail the mission, but would hit that bad story turn. But then there's some people out there who just can push it to the point where they manage to succeed. And it's really tough. It's nearly impossible to. It's like completing something on ultra hard mode while doing it on a timer, and you don't have a chance to like prepare for it, versus like, the majority of people who are really, really bad at it fail before they even start the thing, and then they don't engage that at all. So those are the two kind of things where it's like throwing it in something like that is really kind of cool. And we can definitely see that this is kind of where they're starting to lean with the decision of, hey, we're going to try and incorporate as many choices as we can, but we're not going to make it so that it's just a repetitive choice. We're going to make it so that there is a difference in the choices that you get, and we make it fluctuate quite a bit from left to right and right to left, as far as like being on like a highway, and that was a really terrible metaphor.
Right, but I see what you mean.
The cogwheel, the conversation cogwheel, where it's like, especially in Mass Effect, it's like, oh, the snippy answer is always over here, top left, and the best answer is always to the top right, and that kind of thing, where it's like they don't want to force you to just autopilot through the responses, or the ways that you can complete something. They want you to generally have always be faced with something that makes you stop and think. The more that you can stop and think about something, the more that you can see how your actions affect the game, but not necessarily the end of the game. It's like, if you go through the whole mission, the whole game, and you do so always winning, pretty much every fight and being a total badass, you're probably going to get close to the same completion if you do it all, but just in stealth, right? You're a total badass, but you just mostly use stealth. It's still going to give you like...
Right.
You're still going to complete the main story. You're still going to be the badass. It's just you went about it slightly differently. Whereas it's like, if you're, if you're not able to complete certain missions, or if you did accept certain missions and you completed them, just the fact that you completed some of those missions or you didn't complete some of those missions might change the outcome of the story. And
right,
that's kind of important.
The
so
completed
that's more or less
state, as opposed to how you went about completing the mission.
Mm-hmm. And like I said, this isn't rocket science. This isn't some deep leak. This is basically just them looking at the article that was out and commenting on the article, going, yeah, that's what we're trying to do here, and just refining the answer a little bit. So it's nothing huge. We didn't want to lead with a clickbait title in this, because it's not super clickbaity. But it is, for those of us who are really interested in this, it is fascinating to see that they are planning and they are going out of their way to make sure that the game is going to be something that evolves and reacts as much as the players can make it react. This is not I need to point this out. Cyberpunk 2077 is not a next gen open world game. It's as close as we can get to it, I think, with the current technology. Eventually, we're going to get a game that's an open world game that procedurally creates quests on the fly that are as good as quests that are scripted by actual writers. Eventually, we'll get to this point where, you're going to go into a village that nobody else has gone into because the world is just so ridiculously massive, and you're going to be able to build whatever you want out of that village by doing certain quests and by completing certain main points. That's a next gen like butterfly effect technology that is being worked on, where you can have a world that's take any game that you can think of right now that has a massive open world and multiply its open worldness by about 100,000. Then add in multiply the number of characters and interesting NPCs in the game by 100,000, and then multiply that into a grand scope story, so that you literally could spend your entire life playing the game and not see absolutely everything, because it's created as you play, as you experience. This is a product that they're working on, but it's still quite a ways away. We probably won't see this for another 6 years at the very least with the current technology where it's headed, because there's a couple other things that they have to fix. One of them is the voice acting, and the other is like intelligent quest writing, like automation of writing of quests, making quests interesting that no human player has actually sat down and said, this guy's got a daughter who's sick, and you have to go find this like special flower, but it's guarded by this group of tree nymphs that if you take the flower they're going to die. It's like and having that written in interesting, cool dialogue. That's not going to that's not really going to be. It's not really going to happen for a while yet.
I'm wondering, the first few iterations of that are probably going to have some pretty funny results. Like, you take the magical flower, it's going to make zebras appear. Like, I saw something on Twitter earlier this week. Somebody took an AI, I assume a neural network, and made it listen to over 1,000 hours of the Joe Rogan podcast. And then it got this AI to write its own Joe Rogan podcast, and it was one of the funniest things I have read in a long time.
Hilarious. I didn't read that. I saw that, but I didn't read it. That's going to be pretty hilarious. To answer Niz's question, we don't want Bethesda-type Radiant quests. No, I need to clarify this. The Bethesda Radiant quests that you experience in Skyrim and Fallout, those are not what I'm talking about. Those are like what's a good example? That's like the first car that Mr. Ford put together. The one with the steel wheels, like the wheels entirely comprised out of metal. And it looks like basically it looks like a cart with this weird engine placed on top of it, and like it only went up to like 5 miles an hour at top cruising speed, and couldn't make any sharp turns. It had to make large, wide banking turns, and horses were that's what the Radiant quests were.
Well, it's basically just to swap out the variable. Like the quest is just like, go to insert location here, randomly select location from a database of locations. Go to insert location, talk to insert NPC. He'll tell you where to find blank. Go there, kill.
Oh, not even
kill
even
X.
The Radiant. Yeah, no. Radiant quests in Skyrim were way more complex than even just that. Than what you're describing. It's like they were still significantly more ahead than what you're
really.
What you're saying.
I'm thinking more Fallout 4, I guess. Which I've played a lot more than I've played Skyrim. Fallout 4 was just basically like, yeah, another settlement needs your help, and randomly pick one.
Yeah, no, there was more to it than just that, and
right,
overall,
in general, yeah.
yeah, no. Overall, the general direction of where they're taking the industry and what's kind of going on, in regards to that is like what they're working on is far beyond that. The quests that you're going to see, the Radiant type quests that you're going to see in the next Elder Scrolls game, is going to be absolutely stunning. And even they're only going to be like, their generation like 3. The next generation jump is going to be like generation like 6. So the current quests, the current Radiant quests that you have in Skyrim are like probably like rank 2. So there's a significant jump that's going to happen. So we're not there yet, but we're going to get there. And yeah, I don't want to repeat myself too much. Another question from Andre Velasquez asks, how old do you think the build is from the gameplay that they showed? The gameplay that we saw, if I remember correctly, the gameplay that we saw was the one that was shown at E3, the one that was never made public. That one was created in... That one was done in May, which was about a month beforehand, utilizing the build that had been polished in April, I believe. The one that we saw that came out in August, the actual like 45 minutes of gameplay. The one that we saw was basically a slightly improved version of that one that they had managed to get into the game and get it working for the most part. I believe that was like the same, more or less the same build. So as we saw and as they commented and as we see throughout the general sense of the story and of where they are in the development cycle, what we're seeing and what we're kind of more or less feeling is that they've, from what we've seen, we're approaching on them having worked on that for almost a year.
Right.
So
an April 2018 build. Yeah, that's a year
more,
ago. So
more or less, yeah.
So if you go back and watch that 48 minutes of gameplay, you're watching the game as it was about a year ago, as opposed. And so, granted, so there's going to be tons of improvements and things since then.
Now they've hired, as we talked about on Wednesday, they've hired a lot of people. They've hired a lot of staff. They've hired a lot of people that are tech experts in weapons, in stealth, in some abilities, stuff like that, improving that overall. So what we're going to see more of that kind of stuff. I suspect strongly that the E3 trailer, which I don't think has been the one that we're going to see coming up, I don't think those have finished. They have not. I haven't seen them. I haven't had any like special access or anything like that. But I can guesstimate that we're going to see them showcase the stealth mechanic. They're going to showcase more of the companion mechanics, some more of the abilities, some more of the interaction. As I've said before, when it comes to a first-person shooter, when it comes to the actual shooting mechanic, there's not much more that you can expand upon. This has been something that's been around for a really long time. This type of, it goes all the way back to Doom, right? The original Doom. It's a first-person shooter. There's not a whole lot that you can make different from the next first-person shooter. You can add things like like they've done with over in Techland, working on that one zombie series. The next game is going to be really, really cool, and I can't for the life of me remember the name of it right now. But it's got a lot of parkour in it. That like fast movement, and they've hired some people that worked on that kind of movement system, and that's why you have a lot of sliding and moving and running around, and that's fine. But that's also been around since the early days of Warframe. So again, not even just Warframe. It's like we had wall running in the Jedi Knight series, which was ages and ages ago. We had all this kind of stuff from the Unreal tournament type games where, you know, the shooting, the reflectors, the like tons of this stuff. There's not a lot, like, as far as the evolution of shooting mechanics in gameplay, it's not evolved very much. And it drives me mental when people are like, oh, this is the next generation of shooters where you point a gun at somebody and pull the trigger. It's like, really? Because I played that back in Doom. I'm not being snippy. I'm just saying it's like
We're not talking about groundbreaking changes. We're not talking about
it's
some
not a
brand
groundbreaking change as far as like gameplay goes, as far as like interaction goes. What changes is like the setting, the ability to interact with the world, how NPCs factor into storytelling. You know, most people looked at shooters and they said, you know, this is like super advanced. But then Mass Effect came out and said, but look what happens when we add story into your shooter, and everybody's minds literally exploded all over their faces. That's what we want to see. That's what, you know, we as gamers appreciate. That's what we think is good. That's what makes us happy. That's the kind of content that we're looking into. Dying Light was the name. Thank you very much in the chat.
But it's like Niv Ozzy says here. It's about refinement. It's about small optimizations that make things just incrementally better. And I imagine, so when they talk about how the gameplay looks a lot different than it did a year ago, I think what it means is, you know, we might find that it's got a faster pacing, that the AI is better, that, you know, that just the way the controls respond. I mean, most of us haven't had the chance to try it out, but I think responsiveness of controls is one of the most important things that makes you know, turns a good game into a great game. And if you have really, but we're talking about small optimizations that add up to just a more beneficial experience.
Yeah. So when the word came out, hey, you know, they've radically changed the game since the beginning. What they're talking about is they're talking about the things that they've added, the things that they've made big improvements to. There's still some people out there that I talk to every once in a while where they assume that what CDPR means is that they've created this ultimately new shooter experience. Don't believe that for a second, guys. If there was a new way to do shooting, I think the biggest change as far as first-person shooters was probably like Super Hot. I think that's the biggest like change in gun gameplay that I've seen for since basically BioWare added conversations in an RPG system to shooters. It's like I think that's pretty much the very that's been the most advanced thing. Don't expect this thing to come up with gameplay that you've never imagined before. It's still a shooter.
Right, and it's gonna have some cool stuff like
roleplay. Yeah, absolutely, and it's still gonna be the game of the year in my humble opinion, because they're the way that they've gone about it. But they're not gonna make some way that you've never thought about shooting enemies before. It's like, yeah, they're gonna have like curving weapons. They're gonna have like rebounders. They're gonna have like be able to shoot through walls. They're gonna have like some really cool like setup stuff that you can do, and you can probably tag enemies with some weapons that will then activate once you start to actually shoot them, and then of course you've got the really cool take on melee that they've done. Like, yeah, there's a ton of stuff that they can add, that they can make different, that they can improve upon for sure, but they're not going to add something that you've never experienced in a shooter before. It's like that doesn't happen. And as far as like shooters go, I honestly don't think unless you're talking about now I can't remember the name of it. Goddamn, this is going to drive me mental, because this is a really good example, and I can't think of the damn name of the thing. It'll come to me in a second here, but anyways, Ash, what's your thoughts while I try and look this up?
Well, just as I said, I think we're going to see a lot of optimizations that add up overall to a much better experience. I think we're also going to see, we're just going to see improvements. We're going to see a bigger world. We're going to see better. It's just going to be overall better. They've had a year of development since the gameplay that we saw. Like the gameplay wasn't released a year ago, but if Cyb is correct about the build they used, then what we saw is now a year old in terms of the build of the game, and so there's going to be more, and they've been hiring all kinds of positions. They've got people specifically dedicated to weapons, people specifically dedicated to quests, people specifically dedicated to specific aspects of the game. What was the? Oh yeah, like they hired a position, for somebody specifically to create ads in the game. So they have people dedicated. They've got tons and tons of people, each one dedicated to some specific aspect of the game, or in some cases a team of people dedicated to a specific aspect of the game, and they're just making that aspect of the game the best it can be. And so, by the next gameplay that we see, we're going to see the cumulative efforts of all of these people who have made incremental optimizations and improvements to their aspect of the game, but that's going to add up to just a massively different experience.
Mm-hmm.
So
I found the thing that I'm talking about. So it's basically a form of gun fu, which we have not yet seen in a game done in the way that represents the reality of what gun fu is. Gun fu is where you have weapons at very close ranges. You incorporate shooting, reloading in with melee strikes, blocks, and attacks. The one of the best videos that showcase this. There's a couple of scenes where they do it in some. There's a couple of movies that have come out from China and Japan recently that kind of showcase it a little bit, and they're okay. I think the Dark Tower. I'm probably remembering that Idris Elba movie that came out a little while ago. They had a little bit of that in it, but none of it really showcases it as good as. And brace yourselves. I'm going to mention an anime here. Especially this anime, because this anime is full of landmines everywhere. So Madoka Magica, which I know some people are immediately rolling their eye, and some people are like in the corner, shivering, and other people are like, "Oh my god, I love it." And other people are like, "That I no, stop, please hear me out." There's one fight that happens in it, and you can catch this on YouTube. There's literally thousands of videos that showcase this. It's the Homaru versus Mami fight, I believe her name is. And it's this gun fu type combat where these two girls are fighting, and their bullets only travel a few feet before they're frozen in time, not frozen in, not stopped. They're frozen in time. Because these girls are moving kind of more or less outside of the time in which they're fighting in. So they're firing weapons at each other, and the bullets are pausing shortly after they leave the barrel, which means that the only way that you can get a for sure shot on somebody is getting it at extremely close range. And they're doing this fight, and what happens is, because they're using fully automatic weapons and they're going crazy with it, the area that they're fighting in is just full of bullets just frozen in time everywhere, and there's just arcing everywhere, and they stop and they pause in this one moment, and time goes back to normal, and all these bullets that are literally getting shot in every possible direction suddenly resume their trajectory, and it just blows the crap out of everything, and they have to position themselves in the position in which not to get struck by any of the bullets or any of the shrapnel or any of the ricochets from the bullets. That's the gameplay that, when you can put this into a game, into an actual game, and have the player experience this, that's about the next big evolution that FPS shooters would have, or some really well done version of a gung fu type thing. And none of those things can be incorporated as of yet, and I think those things will require basically a VR. Basically, will require VR as a precedent for incorporating it. As far as shooting goes, as far as shooters go, and the technology we have to offer, we're pretty much at the pinnacle of what we can do without doing something completely different. Completely different, that requires a different way of immersing you into this situation, which would be like a gung fu or this kind of like a time dilation type shooter thing, similar to Super Hot, but a little bit different. Imagine Super Hot, but like multiplayer. But how that would incorporate and how that would work would be really, really difficult, and requires like a completely like total outside the box thinking. So as far as that goes, that's really what I'm saying. It's like, don't expect Cyberpunk 2077 to show you any type of gunplay that you've never ever seen before. Certainly there's going to be like the curving bullets, which is something that has largely not been done just because of the added horsepower that's required to do that type of mechanic. It's not something that's super common, but it's also not something that we haven't never seen before. There's a couple of really cool mechanics. There's like fire and return shots that'll be really interesting. That was in Altered Carbon. He had a gun that did a fire and return, so he shot the bullet out, it embedded itself, and then he could like move his position and then recall the bullet to the chamber and do like a secondary shot. So you could shoot somebody in the gut, then recall the bullet, and move the gun from firing at their gut to firing at their head, and the bullet would retract through the back of the guy's head into your weapon, right? So stuff like that. We're gonna see some more of that kind of like really sci-fi weaponry, and that's gonna be awesome. But aside from like offering you an experience you've never seen before, you do one good gun shooter, you've pretty much done them all. So that's not gonna be where the true evolution of this game is going to showcase itself. The true evolution of this game is going to be the quests, the interaction with NPCs, how you complete quests, how they impact the story, and all that kind of stuff. So it's really exciting, but make sure your excitement is pointed at the right thing, because otherwise you're going to be disappointed if you're expecting, I can't wait to fire weapons that I've never experienced firing weapons before. It's like, here's something with a Neurolace. With Neurolace technology, one of the things that they're working on is multi-targeting and multi-firing. If you're ambidextrous and you're really, really good, you can take two weapons and you shoot them at two separate targets with really good accuracy at the same time, especially if you're really spatially aware. With a Neurolace, basically you can fire 8 weapons at 8 targets while tracking them all. That is going to be another big jump in technology. That is going to be something that's going to, because not everybody's going to be capable of that. Some people can't even like comprehend firing at 2 targets at the same time, and people have a real hard time of keeping track of like more than a single target at a time, let alone 8 targets at a time, and firing with relatively accurate precision. But because we don't have 8 hands and 8 arms, that's something that's only going to incorporate itself once we create a Neurolace that we can identify and create additional limbs from just thought patterns, which is totally possible. It's totally possible. The brain is capable of working with multiple additional limbs. It's something that we've seen in especially people born with like more than one limb due to like an improper twin split and stuff like that. It's totally possible. It's very.
I buy that that's possible. I think the issue with, for example, firing 2 guns at once is it's not so much the keeping track of 2 targets that are both in front of you, but the aiming problem. That's what I always find the most unrealistic about when you watch people dual wield. Now, dual wielding guns in movies and games and stuff is badass. I mean, I'm not gonna, of course, it's really cool, it's awesome, but it's
again,
highly unrealistic. It's highly unrealistic in terms of
you find
aiming.
that difficult. However, we who are more robot than human, we have no problem calculating multiple directional variables at the same time against multiple targets. I mean, that for us is pretty simple. So.
Do you remember that time that I outshot you in that video game?
No, because I think I had put myself at a severe disadvantage. So, also the weapon was crap too.
We were at an
I have to point that
arcade
out.
playing one of those games with the light guns or whatever, and you couldn't believe that I beat you at this game. I don't know if you remember that, but I remember it.
Yeah, I remember that, and I remember I had a crap gun. So just
Oh yes, yeah, the old blame the controller. The old blame the controller trick. But anyway, yeah, I mean...
But no, seriously, the Neural Lace is going to offer... We're going to do an episode sometime soon here on like fringe technology and where it's headed. But it's going to be really cool. So, anyways, we should probably move on to this because we don't have a ton of time today, but we want to cover one or two other things. So, what's next on the docket here?
Next on the docket is we're going to respond to an analyst's take on PC gaming. But first, I just want to say we love seeing everybody so active in the live chat. You are listening to the Augmented Reality podcast, and if you want to keep the conversation going after the live stream here, you can join our Discord community. Find the link to that in the description below. It's a great place where you can talk with us and other Triple S fans about all the things we love to talk about, stay up to date about everything we're doing here at the Triple S League. Click the link below to join, and be sure to say hi to us in the welcome channel. Somebody today, it was Notional, a regular listener and contributor in the live chat of the podcasts, asked about the last night and if there's any more news about that. They're being really quiet over there, so we don't really have much about that. But anyway, I don't think Notional... I haven't seen him in the chat, so I don't know if he's actually here to hear the answer to the question, but we don't know much about that. But that's a game we're definitely keeping our eye on. All right.
It's the same as it was before. They're keeping, they're not submitting weekly updates or anything like that. Tim Surratt is, he's busy at the grindstone pushing that. They had some financial difficulties. I believe that's been resolved, but I'm not positive because again they haven't really been openly talking about it very much. What we do know is that the trailer that we saw was basically just like an advertisement as far as like development. It was not anywhere near completion. I don't like that practice. I find it generally annoying, but it does mean that they are continuing to work on the game. So, yeah.
All right. So there is a new report out from John Petty Research that is forecasting 20 million PC gamers will defect to, quote, TV gaming platforms.
Yeah,
so
it's coming from a guy who's been saying this for years. Ted Polak is his name, I believe. He doesn't even understand the industry. He works for one of these. These analytical companies that they basically do like analytical research for other big companies and governments and stuff like that. They look at a bunch of stats and they come up with an answer and they charge an immense amount of money, and then they sit there and look at you saying, well, you can know that this is true because you just spent $40 million on us telling you this. When basically, and I've said this before, some of these analysts who work at some of these big companies, I know them and I know their work. And essentially what happens at some of these is they take these projects on, they do some Google searches, they find some numbers, they cram it into a fancy display, then they show up, they talk basically BS for the length of like an hour to a board, using terms and language that it's hard for most people to keep up with, and then they sit back and they say, and that's our thing. Now please pay us $10 million and we'll be on our way. These are the same. I'm not going to I'm not saying this directly, but these are the same type of morons that have showed up and given advice to companies to be like, hey, you should go into pachinko gaming. Just make pachinko games. Just make mobile games. It's where the future is. These idiots have no concept of the industry as a whole. They don't understand what they're talking about, and oftentimes they don't even have a general comprehension of the scenarios that they're dealing with in a bigger thing. So this guy, especially this guy, complete idiot. Complete idiot. As far as like knowing, like he doesn't even know how to do like a generalized search into information at all. It's like, it really burns me. So I'm going to go through here and I'm going to shred his concept by just giving you guys some basic numbers from, we're actually going to post it in the description if you want to go down and look at it yourself. This is a very good site. And it's pretty recent. It's as of this month. They use the same metric data that I have access to at the stuff that I work at quite regularly. Overall, this is a really good snapshot of the industry as far as raw numbers goes, but only an idiot works with just raw numbers. You have to know why things are happening, where they're happening. You have to understand what's going on. Just because somebody's buying, more strawberries than they would have 5 years ago. Say there's a town and this town is buying way more strawberries, and you go, wow, they must really love strawberries. Well, actually, as it turns out, they're not actually buying strawberries to eat the strawberries. They're turning the strawberries into jam and then shipping it out. But if you say, look, strawberry consumption has skyrocketed in this town, clearly they want all things strawberries. No, they're actually just, processing it and then selling it again. It's like looking at those kinds of numbers and making those general kind of idiotic, moronic assumptions based off of that. And again, this is not something that the average Joe knows. This is not the average gamer who understands this. Absolutely not. This stuff is you have to be in the industry to understand these differences, to understand where things are going, and then how to react to them based off of what's kind of like what's happening in the rest of the industry. Console gaming is dying. I'll say this again. Console gaming is a dying form. And anybody who tells you otherwise does not know how to look at basic numbers. Basic number. We're not talking about advanced number stats here. We're talking basic numbers. In 2008, almost 90 million consoles were shipped, bought, and played with that year. 90 million consoles in 2008. In 2009, just above 80 million were sold. In 2010, just above 70 million were sold. In 2011, just under 70 million were sold. Now, you might be saying, well, hang on, the consoles last a while, right? So, clearly people are still continuing to buy the consoles, and they're just, just because somebody bought a console in 2008 and they're not buying a new one in 2011 doesn't necessarily mean that they've stopped playing the console. Absolutely right. Gaming overall has been expanding and growing, but as a market share of concurrent repurchases, consoles have been dropping ever since 2008. They've been plummeting. And if you don't think that's true, you shouldn't be in the business. Just putting this out there. You should not be in the industry telling people about the math of the industry without understanding and without going out of your way to understand the numbers. First of all, the market is growing. Yes, there are more. Just because there was 90 million bought in 2008 and 80 million bought in 2009 doesn't mean that there's a maximum of 90 million consoles being played at that moment. No, it increased. It's actually closer to 170 million people playing on consoles at that moment, right? So you got to bear that in mind. However, let's just keep going with the numbers here as far as the units of consoles being sold, because you'd expect at every new generation those numbers would increase, right? Like if they're started out really high and then they taper down, then that must be just because the console's getting old. And then when a new console comes out, it shoots through the roof again, right?
Well, that's what I was wondering. Yeah.
Yes. Well, you think that, you'd be wrong. Just you'd be wrong. So in 2012, the total number of consoles being sold were about 54 million that year. In 2013, it was under 50 million. 2014, 45 million. 2015, just barely above 40 million. 2016 sold less than 38 million consoles. Again, this number is shrinking. It's been diving down. The only change to this recently, the only big change, and why the number is higher in 2017 is because of the Nintendo Switch. That is the only thing. With a side note that the PSP, the PlayStation 4 has been selling a little bit more in this last year. They held steady for the last 2 years, basically selling about the same amount. But they started selling more in 2017, mostly not because people were getting rid of their computers to buy PlayStations. It was because places that previously were not able to buy PlayStations, such as mainland China, were now looking for the cheapest gaming experience that they could get, and it just so happened that the PlayStation made an inroad in that year, so they sold that. But again, don't be an idiot. Don't assume that the straight up numbers here showcase anything, because in 2017, the gaming industry almost sold 50 million consoles. So that's up in comparatively. They hadn't sold that many since 2013. But the biggest reason for that was the fact that they sold nearly 12 million Nintendo Switches. So if you take that out, if you took out the Nintendo Switches, and we're looking at just the regular consoles, they would have had a worse year. They would have had the worst year since they started selling consoles in like 2005. So if you go all the way back to 2005, it was the worst year for selling new consoles. And again, you're saying, but isn't this because consoles last usually? I mean, most consoles last 3 to 4 years or longer if you treat them with general respect. Or if you're not gaming 24/7, surely that's why. That is a little bit, but these are also, the new upgraded PlayStations, the new upgraded Xboxes, the new, other new tech that should have been out, consuming that kind of stuff, consuming that info, that should have been there, but it's not. Console gaming overall has been tapering off as the larger buying force of the industry. It has been less and less of an impactor than what people have previously, what we're seeing as potential long-term growth. So let's look at the same numbers as far as new PCs being bought and run in the past 10 years. So starting at 2011, we had about what is this? This number value is kind of wonky. Oh, right. I see. Because it's in millions of dollars. So in millions of dollars, we had so we had 15 billion being spent in numbers in 2011, and that has progressed and increased every single year up until 31 billion this last year. So whereas the money being spent on consoles has decreased year over year, with the exception of this last year, in the console space, PC space has increased by 100% from where it was, and it's expected to top out well over at 110% at the end of 2020. So, big question here for people who like math: is a decreasing market share more than an increasing 100% self-gain? Now, if you're good at math, you'll say, no, the 100% self-gain is higher than something that is losing numbers every single year. So, again, why people are too stupid to put this together when they're in the industry. This is not, again, not the average Joe. This is a guy whose full-time job it is to look at numbers and give you translations for those numbers.
It's really bizarre because the summary right here on the John Petty Research website says, we are observing a higher percentage of low to mid-range PC products sold because of the consumer's intent to use with games. And he goes on, this foreshadows the ultimate use model of the PC, a desktop ergonomic gaming computing environment that embraces user choice and customization. But then he just switches gears, and in the next sentence says, gaming services used with TV displays, whether local or cloud-based, will absorb PC defectors. It doesn't explain where these PC defectors are coming from or even explain why they're existing.
Or why they're existing, or why those people would move to, like, Stadia is a big thing. We might see a lot of people move over to the Stadia / streaming style of consoles. This is something that's going to be really big in the next generation. Why he thinks, for a moment, without giving any mathematical equation, without giving any scientific look at the scenario, while giving absolutely no proof to anything that he says, like a moron, he just goes, "Oh, that's why this is going to happen here." He literally pulls it out of his backside and showcases it as his pinnacle of proof, being that this is something that he believes. Like a freaking idiot.
Well, there might be, who knows? You can't read the full report. It's behind a paywall. And, if you're willing to pay the $8,000 subscription fee, you can read the entire report.
Which is not worth it. I cannot stress this enough. This guy and this company does this a lot with a lot of things. They are on the average wrong. I was just talking with a family member about housing markets and how they said, oh, well, they talked to a retailer, and the retailer told them that this was going to be what the worth was, and that that the market wasn't going to turn around for the next few years. That the closest thing that could come down the road is 5 to 6 years from now. Absolute idiot. Absolute moron. If realtors were as smart as they claim to be, I don't know how many realtors you've met or you've known. If realtors, land people who help in the sale, and they do a lot of purchasing of land themselves, if they were as smart as all of them claim to be, they would all be billionaires. If every single realtor that I've ever met who bragged about how intelligent they were with land products were as smart as they were, they wouldn't be helping other people buy and sell properties. They would be buying and selling properties. Because they're telling, oh, hey, your worth is going to double in a year. Oh, cool. So if your worth is going to double in a year, then you'd be willing to put money down on this. In fact, why don't you just pay for this right now? Give me 50% of the cost. I'll take the other 50%. And in a year, we'll split it. And we'll both make, 100% more of what we put in. Oh, no, I wouldn't do that. Why? Because they're idiots. The average realtor is right about 20% of the time. A really good realtor is right about 50% of the time. And that's how they make their money. Because if they could make their money any more than that, then they'd be super rich. If you could guarantee that 80% of the time you would have a 50% increase on your money year over year, you would be a billionaire with what is it? It's you'd be a billionaire within 5 years if you had a starting income of $100,000, I think. Something like that. It's no, my math is wrong there. Sorry. Whatever. I'm digressing. It's this concept that oh, I know how to tell you. It's the same thing with people who buy and sell stocks. It's oh, I know what I'm doing. It's really? Then why do you need to do that with somebody else's money? Why I know people who were very successful in the stock market industry, who were really good at looking numbers and making good investments and good buys and stuff like that. And they are rich, and some of them are retired. But that's the exception. That's not the rule. And there's a lot of people in the industry who tell you that they're the rule, right? And it's the same thing with this company. They're absolute morons. They're very seldom correct. and mostly they just make shocking claims, back it up with some phony numbers, and then sit back. So let's look at some gaming stats from 2015 to currently, because this chart is not. Again, if you're looking at these charts, these are showing you raw numbers. They're not showing you the information past the numbers. For example, if I talk to an average gamer and say, what's your favorite thing that you game on, versus what's the most common electronic that you use, versus how many of those electronics do you have within your possession. Those are all different questions that can all give you different answers, and depending on how you report or how you look at it, can affect the way that you look at these numbers. So very quickly, let's look at this here. So in 2015, 30% of gamers used consoles, 28% of gamers used PCs, 24% of gamers used smartphones, 9% used tablets, 6% used casual web games, and a smaller percentage of that used handheld game devices, so like the portable PSP, that kind of stuff. So just a quick question. Do casual web games run on consoles, Ash?
I've never tried, to be perfectly honest.
Well, the answer to that would be no, because you can't surf the internet in a browser on a console.
Well,
unless you like hack it. Or
a lot of consoles come with browsers, but I would agree that it's not used for that. In general, it's not used for that.
The vast majority of web games are played on PCs.
Right, exactly.
So there's a little bit of a number push in which somebody is trying to get you to see one thing, then another thing. Another thing, tablet games. What is used as a tablet in this is anything that can be turned into a tablet. So this does not count tablets that can also be doubled as a laptop. So games that tablets that can get fixed to a keyboard and they can use a mouse. These would also be known as a laptop.
Yeah, PC.
Yeah, which would be known as a PC. That's about 30% of tablets out there that are being used for gaming. There's more tablets out there, but they're like mostly just readers, and they don't actually function on games very well because the other than like the mobile gaming. So you take that, you add that to the mobile gaming market. The mobile gaming market is the biggest by far in all of these metrics. If you kind of sort it out, with the exception of in 2015, basically PC was the biggest, even though on the upfront number roll, it was not the biggest. Now, fast forward to 2019, this year we have about 25% of the gaming public are using PCs, which is down from 28%. So we've lost 3%, or have we? We'll get to that in a second. Consoles, and sorry, I forgot to mention, the console quotes here also include VR. I don't know if you know, but there's VR available for the PC, and those numbers are taken away from the PC and they're put over to the consoles. Why they did this in this particular case is really dumb, frustrating, and annoys me greatly, because all of the VR games that you have on Steam are being played on PCs. They're not being played on the PlayStation, they're being played on PCs. Crying out loud, get your facts straight. It's really annoying to have to kind of dig through this stuff. So you can take about 2% from the consoles, put that over. So we're actually at about 27% for PCs, 24% after we minus the number from the consoles for VR, at about 24% for consoles. 24%? That's interesting, because in 2015, it was 30% of gamers were playing on consoles. Now they're down to 24%. That's kind of odd. It's almost as if they've lost 6%, whereas the PC world has stayed steady at 27%. Now, again, these populations of people playing on these devices continues to grow. This is not the same. In 2015, it is not the same population that you're using in 2019. The population of gamers has increased dramatically. So all of these numbers have actually increased. There's not been fewer consoles, there's more consoles. There's not fewer PCs, there's more PCs. There's not fewer mobile devices, there's more mobile devices. Again, something that idiots who are in the industry of analytics don't understand when they just look at raw numbers. So that let's continue with this here, because we got to take the tablet gaming. We're going to move that 3% over to PC, because 30% of that bulk is actually things that double as a tablet and as a laptop, which you can play any game that you play on a laptop can be played on these crossover tablet type things. So a lot of these are mostly the Windows 10 type tablets that you have. The Microsoft Surface. So you move that over there, which is 4%, bringing that up to 31% of gamers. Oh, now that explains the numbers that we got for this last year in 2018, where it said that the amount of money being put into the gaming industry, 33% of that was coming from PCs. So now we can take a quick look at the casual web games. We can put those all over into the PC market, because again, you don't play casual web games on anything other than a PC. They don't work on tablet games. If they worked on tablet games, or if they worked on smartphones, they would be under those categories. So we move that percentage all the way over. That puts us close to 35%. 35% of the gaming market in 2019 is being played on PCs. The other big 35%, which we can move over that other 6% of the total number over into mobiles, because of the tablets. Tablets and mobiles are pretty much the exact same thing. That's going to put the total number of gamers in the industry currently at 40% playing on mobile devices, 24% playing on consoles and VR and other TV apps, and 35% playing on the actual PCs, with a small little bit in handhelds and some other stuff that in some other numbers that don't really matter. So overall, as far as a mass population, there's an explosion in mobile gaming because they're cheap, they're handy, and everybody has them. However, the majority of people who are playing on mobile devices, who are avid gamers, are also playing on consoles and PCs. You don't own just one of these products. In some cases, these people own one of all of three of these products or more. So when you're looking at this overall, you have to say how many of these predominant smartphone gamers who are playing, games on their smartphone also go home and play their preferred games on their PCs. And
I was
the answer
wondering,
to that is actually quite a bit.
How
There's quite a bit of crossover, but there's also crossover in the consoles as well.
Right. How was this survey conducted? Was it like tell us all the things you play games on, or was it what do you primarily play games on?
No, this is like mostly what do you primarily play games on, or what do you spend most of your hours playing on? So when I'm working, when I'm mobile, my cell phone's my primary tool that I'm using. I'm mobile. I'm running around. I'm going from site to site. I spend about 3-4 hours a day on my smartphone doing stuff strictly on my smartphone. When I'm not mobile, when I'm located in a single spot, I'm mostly playing through the PC, and my smartphone does absolutely nothing other than sit there and look pretty. So that's more or less the how some people look at these numbers. So if you skew them in a way, if somebody is commuting and is spending 2 to 3 hours commuting every day, plus they're spending like another hour on their smartphone during work and when they should be working, or when they're on the can or something like that, that stacks up pretty good when they go home and they play on their $4,000 rig or their console, and they spend 2 hours there. Technically, they're spending more time on the mobile device, and that's how a lot of these charts are made. So there's a lot of people who are primarily PC gamers or primarily console players that spend more time on their smartphone because the smartphone is mobile, whereas their other platforms are not. Does not mean that they are avid or primary spenders in mobile markets. It does mean that they do tend to spend a lot, and microtransactions are the bane of smartphone mobile apps, but unfortunately they make a lot of money. So there's that.
All right.
So overall, when we look at the numbers, in every metric, PC gaming has been growing nonstop, period. It has never, ever, ever had a short year. Whereas consoles have constantly, with the exception of just last year, have constantly reduced the number of sales every year since 2008. Why anybody would think that this change would not, like, and this included, like, this is the new generation of this includes the new generation of the consoles. And yeah, they had the first little burst, but they've gone down and down and down and down and down. And the only time that they've made any like serious progression or serious success is when they release a new console to a new area. It's the only time that they ever like regain some of those numbers. So yes, if you're looking at if you're looking at some number metrics, you can make number metrics say a lot. But if you're educated and you know what to look for, then you're not going to delude yourself by convincing yourself that something else is showing up where it's not. Now, certainly mobile gaming has increased the amount of money going into mobile game development and mobile ads and stuff like that, but it's not the heart and core of the gamer experience. It's not. It's just not. If you took away PC and consoles tomorrow, you'd have crash to the industry as a whole.
All right.
It just wouldn't work.
So PC gaming is not dead. That's
Not
what I'm
dead,
getting.
not
That's what I'm
dying,
getting
not
from
even-
this.
not
It's growing.
Not
It's-
even close. Not
it is
even
coming
close.
to life. All right, we do have some. I mean, we've got some shakeups coming. We've got Google Stadia, of course, as I've mentioned, but
We have the
in
new
terms-
Amazon console that's going to enter the fray at some point in the future. We've heard very little on that, but Amazon has been working on that for a really long time. They are intent on increasing their market share across gaming. They want to have access to it. They desperately want this. Some other quick numbers. So as far as like online gaming for PC, so games that are strictly online, other than a slump in 2014, 2015, they've increased and had continuing success ever since 2011. So the online PC games, bigger than ever, always have been growing aside from like a slump here and there. But overall, so this we're going to post this to the thing. There is a ton of info to go here. There's a ton of numbers and stats and things that are really interesting. It's interesting to note who plays games, the number of so here's something that's really interesting. The number of people who play games passively versus men versus women is really interesting. It's only a difference of 2%. So 23% of men play sometimes, whereas 21% of women play sometimes. The number of like hardcore gamers is 24% male, 19% women. But even that's only a 5% difference. That's shockingly not as big as you would think. Like, you'd think that that'd be huge. I want to cover this one because this is another really, really interesting stat. So, primary motivations for playing video games. For men, it's competition, followed by destruction, followed by completion, followed by fantasy, followed by community. Women, it's totally different. It's completion is their primary goal, fantasy is their second goal, design is the next one, followed by community, followed by story. So, yeah.
That is interesting, actually. Motivations for gaming. We should. That's almost something we should devote its own video or podcast to.
Yeah, we definitely need to hit on this. If you guys really enjoyed this tirade of mine here, as far as like gaming numbers and stats and getting into the analytics, I often don't like go heavy into it because I figure most people, their eyes just glaze over and they just lose all concept of wanting to listen. But if this is something that you guys want me to like go into the numbers, go into the reasons, go into how this stuff works, and this goes into like what I do, more outside my realms. I like analytic data is basically what I do 24/7, and if you want me to go in more, let us know. Let us know if you're interested in that, and certainly pop on Discord and share your thoughts. Because again, it's like the more information I have, the better, and the more accurate I can look at this stuff. So
all right, we got to wrap up here, but thank you everybody for joining us today for the Augmented Reality podcast. Thank you for supporting this show. Thank you for the excellent conversation in the chat. I want to thank our Patreon supporters, Old Man Manson, and our 2 anonymous supporters, channel member Captain Dammit, and everybody who asked questions. Some questions I'm seeing popping up right near the end here that unfortunately we can't get to, but join the Discord server. We can have those conversations there. Cyb and I are on there all the time, especially Cyb is always there talking about this stuff with people. So I'm there too, but often I'm more of a passive observer, but I do jump in when I have thoughts here and there. But anyway, don't forget to slam that like button if you haven't already. Slam that like button. It tells us and YouTube that you appreciate this content. And don't forget to sub. And if you want to be notified when we post content, you have to hit that notification bell. That's been confirmed this week. So, if you're only subscribed and you don't have the bell clicked, then your app will only inform you every now and then when we post something. So it's up to you. I mean, if you want to be notified when we go live or when we post new videos, hit that notification bell and hopefully it'll work. So anyway, if you're listening after the fact on SoundCloud, iTunes, or Spotify, thank you for subscribing and reviewing the show on those platforms. And hey, feel free to join us on Wednesday at Wednesday is 10 p.m. Eastern Time is the live show, 7 p.m. Pacific Time. And then, of course, Saturday mornings, we go live 6 a.m. Pacific Time, 9 a.m. Eastern Time for the live show. So you can join us on those live streams, interact with us and other listeners, and be part of the discussion. The Augmented Reality Podcast is a presentation of the Triple S League. Check out our YouTube channel for game guides, reviews, comedy, news updates, and tons more quality gaming content. My name is Asheninity. On behalf of Cyberpunk, thank you all so much for listening. We'll talk to you next week.